We're on. Okay. Welcome, everyone. This is the House Democratic Caucus on Tuesday, March 12th. Thank you for all for being here. I have a few announcements like usual, and then we're going to go into several different reports on bills, or issues. Um, so up first, I wanted to quick say, make sure that you say hello to Representative Quimby if you haven't met her yet. I was fortunate enough to meet her this morning and walked over here with her. Make her welcome. It's quite overwhelming walking in, as many of our members know too, walking into the session in the middle like this. So thrilled to have her. I just wanted to mention that. Um, our schedule this week is, as I told you last week, 10, 3, 3, and 9:30, but this is our last week to be on that. We're going to be moving to 10, 1, 1, and 9:30 next week, and we will remain that schedule for the rest of the session. Quick also update reminder for everyone, floor is going to start getting longer, and be prepared for that. If we have evenings that we're going into, the speaker's office is checking in with the cafeteria to make sure that they will remain open later if we need to get food, but hopefully we will be fast with our business and not get into our dinners, but you should expect that days will be long, especially on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So just want to make sure that you're all prepared for that. And please, the standard reminder, get to the floor and caucus on time so we can get started on time so that we can end on time. All right, thanks everyone for that. And one other thing, just a reminder, the joint assembly that we have for judicial retention, that's March 26th. I tried to get a time for that, but I don't think the time has yet been set. These are typically at 10:30 in the morning, but I can't confirm that yet. So keep a listen out, but it's March 26th. So that was it on my reports. So or announcements, I'm going to call up members of the Education Committee, Representative Buss and Representative Brady, who will be reporting on H630. Thank you.
So, H630 creates a Board of Cooperative Education Services. You will be happy to know that we are not a leader in the nation. We are, in fact, one of 9 states that do not have an established system of cooperative education services. So, this is called a BOCES. What does a BOCES do? Bulk purchasing for supplies from paper to technology to desks to chairs. We can utilize a federal grant writer that it's often very expensive for each individual district to be able to afford on their own, but a cooperative could hire the grant writer. If you are a member of that cooperative, you have member services. If you are not a member of that cooperative, you can pay a fee for that service. So we could potentially use one federal grant writer for the entire state of Vermont. Same thing goes for contracts for professional development, assessments, evaluation, transportation contracts. Right now, we have one county that has 12 different contracts with one vendor. It stands to reason that if we pooled those 12 contracts, we would be able to do this cheaper. We have literacy issues throughout our state as we've looked at our literacy scores, and we could contract, everyone could use the same contractor to coach their teachers on evidence or science-based literacy practices. And where it's been particularly helpful in other states is with special education services. Right now, we have a lack of availability for placements for kids. If we send them out of the state, we heard in testimony, sometimes that's $200,000 per child. We have some cooperatives that are already in existence but while they are in existence, this creates an established system. But the ones that are in existence, some of them are providing placements for kids at $15,000 a year. So we need to do everything that we can to lower education spending, and we're really excited about this bill. It would just provide a minimum requirement for what the articles of agreement between the supervisory unions would need to be. We've left it very flexible so that they can offer almost any service imaginable to help our schools. And they will be considered a public employer. So if they do hire an educator, they will be licensed. They'll participate in the teacher retirement program and the healthcare system. And same with their executive directors, they would be considered that at the municipal level. There is a very small appropriation, which just helps with legal startup costs. And that is about it. Questions?
You're Avram Pat from Worcester. Just in terms of, it sounds like to me, but I just want to clarify that when you're using the term cooperative, that you're actually speaking about an entity that is formally organized as a cooperative.
That's correct. It will be a body politic and corporate.
Thank you. I can explain what all of that means if anyone really wants to know.
Thank you.
Robin Chestnut Tangerman, Middletown Springs. Just wondering the time frame. When would this be up and running?
That's a great question. We just heard feedback from our Superintendents Association, and they would like to mandate that every supervisory union explore the potential by July of 2026. And if you don't want to create a collaborative, you do have to express why you chose not to. The language also specifically states that the cooperative must be focused on providing cost reduction or enhanced outcomes. And that is reported quarterly to the participating supervisory union boards.
This is a voluntary opt-in structure where supervisory unions can come together. And we've been working on it since pretty much the very beginning of the session, but I'd say it's taken on some urgency in the current climate, as this is not a cure-all, but this is one positive step towards allowing more scale, allowing more collaboration. We've had probably the best discussions in committee about how many collaboratives there should be in the state. And the bill as drafted right now has a maximum of 7. There are currently 5 regions in the state where superintendents do a lot of collaboration informally already, particularly because of COVID. So we are not mandating anything here, but we are certainly have a clear eye towards what would some more regional collaboration look like. And if we can create really strong voluntary structures now, what opportunities might that even create down the road? Questions or comments? Thank you. Like always, if you have questions that occur to you, go to the Education Committee. And I'm going to stick with education topic and bring up the chair, Representative Conlon, and the chair of Ways and Means, Representative Kornheiser, to just give a quick update, sort of something on school budget. There you go.
Those were some tall people here before. We'll do it something in between the two of us here for the microphone. Hi, everyone. So just to continue to first start by level setting. I know many of you have heard this before, but education spending and spending on education, which are 2 different things, first one's a technical term, are expected to go up this year. And they are expected to go up because of a real wide variety of reasons. So it's post-pandemic student needs, it's collective bargaining agreements, post-pandemic, mid-pandemic, it's teacher health insurance costs, it's other inflationary pressures like, the cost of heat, the cost of supplies, significant school construction needs after we've stopped investing in school construction on the state level, and the implementation of Act 127. All of those pressures cause our districts to say that they need to spend more money this year to meet teachers' needs. And that happened at the same time that there was a loss of revenue to districts specifically because of ESSER funds, which were federal pandemic era funds to districts, going away and spending being completed on that, as well as revenue into our own education fund declining because of post-pandemic sort of the spending bubble dissipating. And so the combination of the reduction in revenue and the increase in spending led to projections of significantly increased taxes, property taxes across the state. We've heard we've heard from our superintendents, we've heard from our teachers, we've heard from our communities that all of those needs are real, that schools are struggling right now, that our kids need us. And we've heard from property taxpayers across the state that a rise in property taxes of that magnitude is a significant ask in a single year. All of that to say, and I know I've said that all to you before, but I'm just going to keep on saying it. On Tuesday, town meeting day, we saw some slightly unusual school budget votes. This has happened before in Vermont history, but it is significant. Some of the reporting has, or sort of word of mouth has been summarized as a third of school budgets did not pass this year. I want to be clear that that is not what happened. So I'm going to go through the numbers of what happened. A third of the budgets that were voted on Tuesday did not pass. That is not a third of all budgets statewide. So 67 budgets were approved on Tuesday. 30 budgets were defeated on Tuesday. 8 budget votes were postponed because of the mechanism that we set in place in Act 84, that's H850. And 14 budgets are still sort of under normal circumstances set to be voted at a later date. Wyndham Southeast, where I live, is one example of that. So all that said, what that means is we still have a very uncertain environment about what we expect education spending to be this year. A lot of school districts, including those who haven't voted yet, but might not have had a budget defeated, we know are going back to the table. But I think we're here to say, what are we doing about it? And so I'll tell you, your Ways and Means Committee is continuing to focus on the yield bill. That's really our next step, is to look at what budget, how we want to set tax rates for this year. But given how few large budgets were approved because of sort of those 3 other categories I talked about, we don't yet necessarily have all the information I need. One other thing I wanted to add is those sort of categories of spending that I talked about at the beginning. We've recently been able to get significant data from the Agency of Education about what those warned budgets looked like. And it's really almost equal proportion in each of those categories I mentioned. So I think we all have the instinct to say, yeah, I know it's those other 7 things, but it's that 8th one that really is the thing that we should do something about. And it was really quite striking once we were able to look at the data with the Agency of Education to see that it was really almost equal proportions of all of those drivers of increased spending and decreased revenues. So what comes next? I'm going to turn to Peter.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to repeat a little bit of what we've talked about previously, but then talk about sort of the immediate aftermath of the votes and what we're doing in House Education. So again, you just heard of a bill, which is one of our strategies to address things in the future. These boards of cooperative education services is really an opportunity to enable school districts and supervisory unions to come together to build scale and hopefully evolve in such a way that they are able to provide services that they wouldn't otherwise normally be able to do on their own, that will not only save dollars, but perhaps enhance revenue as well. We are continuing to work on our school construction bill that will be voted out of committee this week, like most other bills. And that will continue to look at how the state can step in and assist districts that are facing major construction projects. We have language to bring a responsible end to the PCB testing program until such time as there is a proposal or system to fund that work in such a way that it does not become an unfunded mandate on school districts. More immediately, we are, and we continue to look at how we can fund our community schools project. And we talk about community schools, we're talking about capital C, capital S. This is a model that we've piloted over the past 3 years in a number of districts. And it really is showing great potential to address student need in an efficient and an effective way with sort of having the school provide more wraparound services, and we are looking at how we can continue to fund that.
And excitingly draw down federal funds for that.
Yeah, yeah. One of our constant themes that we talk about is how do we draw down more federal funds, and that's one of the areas that we also need to think about, where we're empowering state government and providing them the resources to do that as well. More immediately, in the aftermath of town meeting votes, we have tomorrow, Thursday, superintendent's coming in to speak to us for a couple of hours to kind of talk about the impact on them, how they're addressing it, how their school boards are addressing it. We've got some rather tricky situations where, for example, a non-operating school district that doesn't operate a school, they only pay tuition, voted down their school budget. Well, they have no place to cut because they're obligated to pay tuition for all of their students. So there's some tricky things we need to work out. But we also just want to hear again from them about how they're addressing this, how they feel we should be addressing it. On top of that, we are scheduling a couple of hours with the Secretary of Education to listen to the administration's points of view, kind of their concepts, but more importantly, their ideas about how to turn those concepts into reality. So our sort of listening tour continues as we address these things. You know, education policy won't address the money issue immediately. It often requires long-term investment to get long-term gain. But those are the strategies we're dealing with right now, and that's what we're hoping to learn more about this week as we hear more testimony.
Don't walk too far. And so we have those long-term policy strategies that should both reduce costs in the long term, draw down more federal funds in the long term, and maybe most importantly, increase outcomes for kids and families and schools in the long term. In terms of the long-term work of the Ways and Means Committee, looking out to FY26 and FY27 and beyond, we are getting very clear on the fact that, you know, equity of both our tax structure and educational opportunity is a real key piece of Vermont's education finance law, and something we have succeeded at historically, really been a national leader at. We want to maintain that. We also know that there has really been significant confusion in communities this year. And perhaps historically, we're just talking about it a lot more this year. And so really want to increase transparency in that system and simplicity in that system as much as we can. And we know that what has become very clear with the implementation of the weights is we have now essentially accounted in our tax system for the student needs that should result in higher spending. And what we still see is a really big range between districts that spend a lot per pupil and districts that maybe spend not even close to enough per pupil to meet those kids' needs. And so we want to do everything we can to really close that gap to make sure that we have opportunities for all of the kids in our state, because that is sort of the promise of both our education policy, but also the promise of a statewide education fund. So we are always open to any questions or communications from constituents you want to send our way. And we are taking a lot of testimony, continue to.
Sorry. Yes. Okay. So Jessica Brumstead, at our Shelburne town meeting, we have a dinner beforehand, and one of the people in attendance is a past economist for Vermont. And he brought up something that I hadn't heard before, and that might be just because we've never voted down our budget. Is that if you continue as a town to vote down your budget to a certain date, then you go to 85% of your last year's budget. Is that true? And what does that mean?
So essentially, if on July 1st, which is the new fiscal year, you have not agreed on a budget, we need some default mechanism. So we don't have sort of government shutdown, right? And so you default to that, I believe it's 87% of your last year's budget.
Okay. Okay, I haven't.
But that in this particular year, that would not, the ways that might be a reduction or not a reduction is sort of an interesting piece of this puzzle because of how ESSER money was able to supplement budgets in last year.
Because that's what the group all were jumped onto that and said, great, we're just going to keep voting it down. So it'll be interesting.
And I don't think we can say enough how incredibly disruptive and disheartening and divisive a budget being voted down is in a community. I know some communities are very accustomed to it, but it's we would like to help communities find a better path forward.
Hi, Julia Andrews. So we need budget information from across the state to set the yield. And so that information is now delayed. And so this is kind of, for me, the first time that I'm seeing this. So what is the timing for us to set the yield? Like, how does that mechanism work?
Today, in the Ways and Means Committee, we will hear from Nicole Lee at the Agency of Education, and she'll talk us through sort of the sum total of budgets that have passed and what proportion that is of overall education spending, so we can make a decision about what we will need to set the yield.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Scott Campbell from St. Johnsbury. That leads me to wonder, what's the deadline for districts to vote a budget? Is for you to have enough information to be able to set a yield?
So when we passed H850, I've already forgotten what the act number was, we set a deadline if folks did want to delay their budget votes to April 15th. But that is quite late for us. If every district waited until April 15th, we would have a hard time, given that we all do like to leave here in May. But the yield is one of two must-pass bills.
Right. But I guess I'm thinking about the districts that voted down their budgets, not the ones that took advantage of the delay.
Yeah, so there's nothing in statute about that. The closest thing we have in statute is that signal we sent with the April 15th. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear about that.
Hi, Kate Lally, Shelburne. I just wanted to offer maybe a counterpoint to the experience that Jessica had. Our town is really not that heartless. The vast majority of people, in my experience that I talked to on town meeting, were frustrated about how much things are costing. And also that, the outcomes that the system is delivering are really not what people are expecting. So I'm very heartened to hear about the new initiatives in the Education Committee, and we'll look forward to letting people in our community, through our community newspaper and other means, know about the good work that is being done, and that this long-term reform is really the goal, so that we can have a system that we can afford, that has predictability about its long-term costs, but that also delivers equitable and excellent outcomes, as the system did when we moved here 20 years ago. And that was really a big calling card for my family to come here. So just wanted to say that.
Just to comment a little bit, we are working on the bills in our committee that we started, given our limited time, but we haven't started having the bigger conversations about how we get to some of those points, and frankly, to hear from the administration about some of the concepts that they have floated. We've got to talk about class size. We've got to talk about the number of buildings that we operate, and how do we get to sizes that are right, not just for the taxpayer, but that are right for Vermont and how we choose to educate our kids. Town meeting was a little tricky. There was a lot of different messages being sent by some of the vote outcomes. We have, a fair number of budgets that were voted down, and we had a fair number of referendum on keeping schools open or closed. And that message perhaps was a little bit in contrast to the other message. And so we need to sort through all of that and kind of figure out what the path forward is that, you know, the vast majority of Vermonters can agree with.
And when we talk about economies of scale, I think people usually just think of class size, but there is also the capacity to write federal grants. There's the capacity to manage construction. There's the capacity to have stable revenue and expectations in ongoing years. And all of those are, you know, economies of scale make a difference in those two. And the Agency of Education in an ideal system would be supplying a lot of that support. And I think that's a lot of what these bills will move us toward. Okay, we'll take one more question.
Hi there. I'll stand up so you can see me. One of the things that came up, this all right, volume all right. One of the things that came up repeatedly at our town meetings, Rebecca Helcom, I don't see her here anyway, was all the things that are in the education fund that have been added, some by default and some by design, which are costing a lot of increased cost to schools. All of them I voted for good reason, I thought. But now it seems to me that some of them we should look at independently. Students' healthcare costs, for example, should that be separately funded or separately debated so that we understand what we're getting and also what the outcomes are. And that's a discussion that's not going to go away. And I think we need to address it. Thank you.
One piece of that I've heard from folks a number of times is, you know, we're paying for these things at our schools that we didn't used to have to pay for them. There were things that maybe perhaps were previously funded by the general fund. If we move those costs back to the general fund, we're still going to need the revenue to pay for those things. It's not like they will all of a sudden become free for Vermonters. And I know everyone knows that, but just shifting resources between funds doesn't make new money appear. And so that's something we really need to think about. And the community schools model, as Peter said, is an acknowledgement that it actually might be best for student outcomes to deliver services where kids are and where families go regularly. And so if we acknowledge the reality that, yes, we have shifted all these costs onto the education fund, maybe we did it for really good reasons. Let's make sure we're actually doing it well and with federal dollars.
I would just add one more. We will certainly be looking at what's in the education fund that we may want to revisit. There are programs, and it's not big money. It's not going to move the needle. But there are things that we do fund in the education fund that aren't necessarily essential. And I would just offer only as an example with no opinion, early college. We pay tuition to colleges for students to have their first year at one of our state colleges. It's, you know, for our personalized pathways sort of model that we have, it's a great opportunity. But again, it's something that's in the ed fund that is extra.
And before I go on to the next, I just want to say thank you to both the Education and Ways and Means committees this year and for the nonstop updates that we've all been able to. I mean, it really has been nonstop, and they're kind of laughing down here, but the fact is that we've all needed it, and so have Vermonters. So it's really important what we've been hearing and that we're staying focused on this. And I'm feeling very grateful for all the work that's going on in those two committees and beyond. Because it's happening in our local communities as well. So thank you both. And if you have any further questions, because I'm sure people do, reach out to either committee, members of either committee, just to get feedback and support, because it's there for you. Okay, I'm going to move on and change the topic from education, and we're going to go, if you're okay, you are. Representative Byron's going to come up. To do, let me see, it's H612. It's the miscellaneous cannabis.
Hello, everyone. Hope you all had a nice break. It's great to see everyone. So this year's miscellaneous cannabis bill, H612, has a lot of different moving parts. We're into through our first full year, going into our second full year of retail cannabis. So we've been listening to license holder stakeholders and the public a lot as we formed this bill. There's quite a few different aspects, so I'll just go over them high level. We're clarifying some language around low THC products, just to offer more clarity. These are things like tinctures, textiles, things of that nature. So nothing that has any inebriating factor. One of the bigger pieces that we're doing right now is around medical licensing. We are seeing a need for greater access to medical products. So this bill provides an additional endorsement to retail licenses, should they choose. And so this would allow them to offer a range of cannabis products to people with a medical card, so higher THC products and some items that are not available in the retail outlets. Now, I want to be very, very, very clear that this does not provide access to people who are looking to consume recreationally. This is merely providing access to those who hold a medical card for legitimate reasons. So with that, opening the access, the CCB will put together rules and develop those for the expanded market. But again, I want to reiterate that this does not expand access to anyone who does not hold a medical card. Moving on to retail licenses and cultivator licenses, we are proposing in this bill to give the CCB the ability with retail licenses to take some more considerations into place when they are looking at new applications around population density, siting, things of that nature. And the goal here is to try and avoid clustering of licenses. And we're seeing some issues. We're getting feedback from folks in the industry about municipalities seeing, like I said, clustering and whatnot. So this will allow the CCB to take a few more sort of population density measurements, things of that nature, while they're in the approval process. On the cultivation side, we're also allowing the CCB to take some performance standards into place. What does that mean? We have different tiers of licenses on the cultivation side. So canopies, right? Like 1,000 square feet, 5,000 square feet, et cetera, et cetera. So people are underutilizing the canopy right now. They're not putting out a volume of product with the total square footage. So the CCB will work with them and possibly reduce the tier on their licensure. And also, if they're only using maybe 70% of their canopy, et cetera, putting measurement standards on what they can put out into the market. The goal here is to avoid a glut in the market itself and to help stabilize the price. Other states that haven't done measures like this have seen a crash in the price of the commodity itself. And that's been very detrimental for those who have the licenses and also tax revenues and things of that nature. Moving on to two appropriations actually. These are for the Business Development Fund and technical assistance and loans for people coming into the marketplace, social equity considerations, et cetera. These are the same appropriations to $500,000 appropriations that we did last year. Yep. Moving on to another piece with setbacks. This is something that we put into the bill when we voted it out just before break. What these would do is, first thing it does is establish a cultivation district. Municipalities can choose through the cannabis board to set up a cannabis cultivation district, which would be a preferred area in a municipality for people to do outdoor cultivation. If they chose to do that in this preferred area, there would be a 25-foot setback. If they choose not to have their license in the cultivation district, what we proposed is a 100-foot setback. Yes, please. All right. So this has been one of the harder
things for us to work on. So thank you, Representative Byron. I think you did a great job explaining a number of the other things that are in the bill. So we, as a state, I want to back all the way up because some folks are probably hearing from growers who are really concerned about this setback provision. And that's understandable. And I want to validate that concern. So we, as a state, gave some of the benefits of farming to outdoor cannabis cultivation throughout the history over the last few years of this market. And in H270 last year, we actually had those benefits of farming apply not just to the smaller tier 1 cultivators, but to all outdoor cultivators, because there are a lot of benefits to outdoor cultivation. It uses less energy. We want to promote outdoor cultivation over indoor cultivation for a number of policy reasons. However, we've seen that there are some municipalities where folks are growing in places that I think are not what we envisioned for where cannabis cultivation would happen. And so what this bill does is it gives the municipalities the choice. I wanted to make that really clear, that have zoning to establish up to a 25-foot setback in a preferred cultivation district that they have to establish, or up to a 100-foot setback outside of that preferred cultivation district if they've established one. Now, that is an ordinance, a zoning bylaw that they would have to establish, the municipalities. So, and then it establishes, there has to be a default setback for areas that don't have zoning. That's just 10 feet. That's not really the crux of this issue. That gives some of the power back to municipalities to have local conversations and local power about where it's appropriate to have commercial cannabis cultivation. And folks have questions about that, they can talk to me or Representative Byron. Thanks for letting me jump.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. Sorry, I'm also operating on about 3 hours sleep. I had a delayed flight last night, so I'm a little punchy. So thank you. Yeah, gotta love those late night Burlington flights that are malleable with the departure time. Anybody with any questions right now?
Thank you, Representative Tristan Roberts, Halifax. I've heard from some constituents that the packaging requirements are onerous in regards to no plastics, and those are driving up costs. Did the committee look at that?
We didn't have any real in-depth conversation on that this year. I do know, as you stated, that we have some of the stricter packaging requirements as far as plastics and non-biodegradable, et cetera. But we've heard that from operators and manufacturers, certainly. The Cannabis Control Board's looking into that as well.
Thank you, Representative Tom Stevens. On the medical marijuana stuff, there's two questions. Please fill us in a little bit on the need for the high-end THC content, about specifically why we're approving that. You said it was for medical reasons. Is this a pain, is this pain relief? Is this, I've heard about it for cancer treatments, but, and the second piece is, again, it was in a lot. I got several phone calls on these issues as well during the break, but the question on the medical cards is, are the requirements as tight as we say they are? There are people who have jokingly said, "Oh, I'll just get my card and I'll be fine." So I just want you to address those if you could.
Okay. On the second piece, it is my understanding that we actually have some for the states that have medical licensed medical marijuana. We have some of the stricter provisions that are out there. So I've heard anecdotally and through people in the industry that we do have very well established standards on the access to the card itself. As far as the higher your THC products, yeah, we haven't changed anything about the access. All we're doing is just opening up more doors to folks so they have lower drive times, more regional access to it. There's only a handful of medical licenses out there. So we're trying to utilize the retail as a resource to help facilitate access to people who have the medical need.
If I can just jump in there too to add a couple of things, Representative Byron. So we are not changing anything in this bill about what products are available to the people who are purchasing cannabis products. What we're seeing right now in the marketplace is that the number, since we've had over a year now of a retail market established, the number of people that are actually going and getting registering as medical consumers of cannabis has dropped by about half. And so what that's done is it's made it so that the economic viability of the medical only dispensary doesn't really exist anymore. So the reality of what's going to happen with this medical endorsement, which will have all of the same regulations and then some of the current medical dispensaries, is that the Cannabis Control Board will be allowed to license people who sell on the retail side to also have a medical endorsement. The reality of what's going to happen because of the cost of that and the high regulatory bar that's there is that it's really going to be the current medical dispensaries that will actually sell retail. So what we heard very clearly in testimony is that what we're really trying to do is preserve access to some of those medical products. A lot of the focus and attention and concern has been about higher THC products, but the things that I'm most concerned about is for folks who are treating symptoms with things like high CBD, low THC cannabis products that won't be available if the medical market completely goes away. And so the Cannabis Control Board's really recommended that we go ahead and do this so that we preserve the existing access to those products. And I think we all share the concern about the proliferation or access to really high THC products, and to make sure that those have the strongest regulations and that we protect public safety and public health.
Okay. Questions or comments? You? Yep. Get some sleep. Okay. I was gonna just announce that he'd only had 3 hours of sleep, but I decided not to do it because I thought you all might see it and I could see it, and then he announced it himself. Late flights are really difficult. So anyway, thank you. If you have questions, give him a day, but go to. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. This is up tomorrow, right? Oh, it's going to. So it's not up tomorrow, so you can give him a day. So go see Representative Byrong or anyone on GovOps. If you have questions, please do not hesitate to do that. Was there something else you wanted to add? Oh, okay. All right. So we're going to move to another committee, Judiciary. We're going to have Representative Dolan, who's going to come up first. We've got 2 bills coming out of Judiciary that we want to report on. The first one is H645, pre-charge diversion. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. So we have H645, which is an act related to the expansion of approaches to restorative justice. And I'm really going to try to stick to a high-level overview. It's a 60-page bill, and it's really working to revamp the restorative justice system in Vermont, but happy to take any questions or discuss any of the specifics in it. Again, the goal really is to rework the restorative justice system in Vermont to be cost-effective and work for all Vermonters. So H645 has been years in the making and has been informed by a wide net of stakeholder input. Justice reinvestment initiatives in recent years served as a catalyst for re-examining the structure of restorative justice in Vermont. Although programs and services were serving communities well, when a statewide lens was applied, it became evident that the structure included some inefficiencies and redundancies, along with some noticeable gaps. And H645 addresses these areas by taking some key restructuring measures. And for folks who appreciate a visual, an image that is often used to describe our current restorative justice landscape in Vermont is an old farmhouse that has had a number of important, yet sometimes uncoordinated additions and renovations over the years. The final structure is functional, but not necessarily practical. It may be that some of the additions have inadequate access from other areas of the house. Some spaces might not have ideal plumbing or heating, or some spaces may be simply unnecessary, such as multiple hallways or poorly configured rooms to accommodate a retrofit. So if the current landscape of restorative justice in Vermont is this type of farmhouse, H645 is the blueprint to modernize the building for 2024, keeping the same goals of the original house, but now includes an architectural plan that incorporates lessons learned from all the years of renovation and works towards ensuring access for all Vermonters. The expansion of restorative justice as proposed in the bill comes at a critical time for Vermont, with increased community concerns regarding public safety and the challenges of court backlogs, along with mounting financial pressures in all areas of state services. It's essential that we invest in public safety measures that are both effective and timely. Community-based providers testified repeatedly how restorative justice offers a high-impact, lower-cost intervention compared to traditional court interventions in a more timely manner, often within weeks of an incident rather than months or even years. H645 seeks to build on these outcomes in order to develop a more consistent statewide approach with a data collection model that will allow Vermont to more precisely evaluate program effectiveness and overall cost savings. And I think I will pause there. I do have some more that kind of gets into the details of it. Again, it is a lot, and I know that we're right up against lunch. So I'll share that in House Judiciary this passed out on a vote of 830. It went through the money committees as well and is going to be on the floor tomorrow.
All right. That was the first of two judiciary bills. And thank you. If you have questions that come up, see Representative Dolan or anyone on judiciary. And the next bill is H534. It's the retail theft bill, and Representative Knott is going to report on that.
Hi. So I think most people in this room, when we've taken part in community forums, it's before session started, during session, we've gotten emails. We hear a lot about public safety, and we hear a lot about perceptions that crime is out of control, that things are not as safe as they were for Vermonters. There's a real sense of unease out there. And the statistics and the reality on the ground doesn't necessarily codify people's fears. But there are things that we can do, and there are things we should do about public safety. And one of the primary ones that we have heard about, we've taken testimony on, is retail theft. Our courts have a backlog. They've had a severe backlog since COVID. And what that means is people who are arrested for minor crime, retail theft, they might not have their court date until months after their initial arrest. And with some individuals, what that means is that they commit the same crime and are arrested multiple times before they even have their first day in court. And this has caused a real sense of unease in many of our communities. I know it has in mine with a few bad actors who are committing the same crimes over and over again, to the frustration of our local law enforcement, local shop owners, and to a real sense of distrust with government from our citizens who wonder, how can this be allowed to happen? So H534 attempts to address this in a couple of ways. First off, it will look at those retail thefts. And right now, every retail theft is its own independent violation. Someone could go in to court for, let's say, 8 occasions of 8 retail theft and get 8 very minor fines, penalties. What this bill does is it will combine retail thefts that occur in a single county over a 14-day period. And right now in law, the marker between a misdemeanor charge and a more serious felony charge is $900 of value. So what this will do is, I'm going to read a little bit of the bill. A person who commits more than one retail theft offense in violation of subdivision 25751 of this title and within a 14-day period within a single county shall be punished by a fine of not more than $1,000 or or imprisonment not more than 10 years, or both, if the aggregate retail value of the merchandise taken away exceeds $900. So what it does is, instead of having a series of smaller offenses, when appropriate, it could combine them into one more serious offense. This brings more accountability. The hope is that it would also clear up some court time by taking several small offenses and doing one court appearance instead. And it is something that our law enforcement, our state's attorneys seem pleased to have as an option. And it addresses perceptions of retail theft being a real detriment to our communities. The bill also evolved during testimony in committee. We had state's attorneys in to testify. And one thing we heard from them was they missed what was previously known as work crew. And so this is a work crew program was stopped during COVID due to lack of numbers for participation. But that's because it was COVID. Our state's attorneys like to have the option of what is now going to be, let me find this exact term, community restitution program. We're trying to do away with the idea of work crew because it's not going to be people out mowing lawns, out weeding cemeteries. The Department of Corrections has gotten rid of the equipment they use for that. This is going to be a more open program, more accessible to people no matter what their age, physical condition, so on. But what it will be is a means for someone who has committed a minor crime to be sentenced to 3 or 4 days of work of restitution and the restitution program. And what that will mean is they're out, they're in their community, they're giving back. And if they do not show up, they don't have to go back to court. There's not additional court time. They have that period in jail. So there's a real incentive for people to take part in the program, to get back to their community and move forward. It also clears up our court time, and it also keeps people out of jail. Because quite frankly, if someone's doing 3 or 4 days in our prison system, there's a very good chance that they'll be exposed to people and for longer times, and their takeaway might actually be to the detriment of our communities at large. So this keeps people hopefully on a clear path to recovery and to restitution. And as I said, it was something that the state's attorneys asked for. It is something that our law enforcement seems to be excited about. And that's what, in a nutshell, this bill does. And again, I can't stress enough, this is not an end-all be-all. There are many bills, the one you just heard of, that Judiciary Committee has worked on this session to address public safety and the perceptions about it. There are a multitude of approaches in Judiciary Committee and in other committees for this, because we all know that homelessness, we all know that substance abuse disorder plays a huge factor in public safety and our perceptions of it. This bill is just one small tick in a progress towards making Vermont safer, making Vermonters feel safer. But it is a positive bill. It's something we can hang our hats on. It's something that law enforcement, our state's attorneys seem very happy with. It was voted out of committee on a 10-0-1 vote, and I'll be presenting on the floor tomorrow.
Questions or comments? Judiciary Committee is knocking it out of the park. All right. Oh, there's one. Hang on. Just sit down, Jim.
I don't think I really need to introduce myself. You've seen the pictures in the paper. But I met one of the folks that I spent 21 days with during March and late February told me about his history of going into Walmart. Probably shouldn't say this on television, but he goes in to steal so he can then sell the drugs. And he wasn't proud that he was doing it, but what this all goes back to, what I saw in the facility where I was, is recidivism. and it's all tied to drug use. And fallback on this, and I got this from the director of the facility, is that she said for her particular facility, before state funding was cut for aftercare, was 16%. It's now 60%. So it's a revolving door. There was one guy who said that in the last 18 months, he'd been there 12 times. And it all goes back to aftercare. And I'll talk more about that at a later date, but I wanted to.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll just add that we certainly know that when we're looking at public safety, when we're looking at our perceptions of public safety, how Vermonters feel in their communities, the Judiciary Committee does not have the monopoly on this. Human Services, the Health Committee, there's a lot of committees doing important work. And this is really maybe the most powerful example we have this year of the way all of our work, which can feel so siloed at times, is actually tied together to really achieve some vital goals.
Okay, one more.
Get my stuff.
Kirk Taylor in Colchester. Is this a new program under the auspices of DOC or?
Yeah. So thank you. I should have mentioned that. So instead of revitalizing or reviving the old work crew program, the community restitution program, is a new program that the Department of Corrections has started. They do not believe it'll require any additional staff. They'll be able to operate it with staff in place and using both DOC facilities and sub facilities. They've assured us that it'll be available in every county in Vermont.
Right. If you have further questions, if they occur to you, go to Representative Knott or anyone on Judiciary. That's it for today. Thank you all for being here. Have a great week. That was a lot of really good information. I want to thank all of your committees for all the work you're doing.